objectives. If they're going to take out the nuke threat, then they've got to answer where's the enriched uranium, where are the threats? And if they can't show us, we can't believe them. And that's where we are now. So we're stuck in this place where he's trying to negotiate with China, who is ultimately the big winner this week.
Your thoughts?
Truth is always the first casualty of war. And we're in a really difficult and unique and dangerous situation where we can't trust the Iranian regime and we can't trust the Trump regime. So we're trying to parse through the middle of that and find out what the facts are on the ground. And we're also not hearing from the Iranians for the most part, at least the Iranian people. So I think we're in a really, really challenging situation where we need the president to prove it. And keep in mind, this is his second shot at this. He had the shot before, and now he's taken a shot again, and it looks like he's missed or he's failed to complete one of his many, well, at least 4 objectives. If they're going to take out the nuke threat, then they've got to answer where's the enriched uranium, where are the threats? And if they can't show us, we can't believe them. And that's where we are now. So we're stuck in this place where he's trying to negotiate with China, who is ultimately the big winner this week, right? They're just happy to sit there and watch us punch ourselves out, put 40% of our Navy in the Gulf, have 50,000 troops tied up. And now we're hearing that the Army has to cut training because of their overcommitment to Iran and to the border. This is how we get overextended. And there's no clear off-ramp here. And unless we send boots on the ground, it doesn't look like we will be able to secure these missile sites, which is why no president has done this before. So now we're seeing the limitations of his strategy, the limitations of our isolation, and the dangerous overflow that can happen for the rest of the world. Because ultimately, the barometer here is the Strait open? They don't need to have full capacity. They just need to have enough to make going through the Strait dangerous, and that puts them into control to have a chokehold over the world's gas station.
Well, on just a single objective that was articulated by Marco Rubio, which was to, quote, destroy their ballistic missile capability, Trump's own intelligence community seems to be saying that that was not achieved.
Yeah. I mean, this is where, Trump is often in conflict with his own intelligence community. And now we're going to see the spin machine at full tilt. They're going to call people traitors. They're going to attack the press. They're going to attack the messengers instead of the actual facts on the ground. And I think this is a really important point, especially for Republicans, to say, prove it. If you're in conflict with the intelligence, show us. Zelensky does a brilliant job of this, I think. They have like infographics almost every single day showing the degradation of the Russian military. They talk about specific targets and what they've taken out. They have a scoreboard that the world can see every single day. We don't have that right now. We just have to take Trump's word for it. And the whole world thinks that Trump is a liar. So it does put our troops in an incredibly precarious position. But now it's also putting pressure on NATO. What are they going to do about it? If America fails to solve this problem, can Israel act on their own? Can NATO come up with a solution? Because by the day, I think we are in a weaker position. Trump is more isolated and the world is less safe.
Of its missile sites, so it may not be so decimated after all. Paul Rieckhoff is here for his weekly visit, host of the Independent Americans podcast. Man, we could put up the Times story. What do you make of this? We've been being lied to? Was that your read when you saw the Times story?
I think we can't trust the Iranian regime and we can't trust Trump. I mean, it looks like both of them are being untruthful or lying about how good their position is. But at the end of the day, the Strait of Hormuz is still not open. And until it is, they have enough military capacity to cause trouble and disrupt the entire world economy. And I've said to you for weeks that Iran can become a sucking chest wound for the United States. And I think this week especially, we're seeing that happen. Our military continues to get sucked in. We've still got 41% of our Navy there. Yeah. Now we're seeing the Army has to make cuts because of how much they're overextended in Iran and other places. And I think it's a big week for the Chinese. It's a winning week for the Chinese. They have a very strong hand as they look at us continuing to be pulled into Iran without an exit plan.
Well, the Army was going to cut training, right? Because they're spending so much. Or, Hegseth was up on Capitol Hill this week talking about spending literally trillions in other places, but you got to cut somewhere, and that's where they're cutting.
Yeah, I mean, he wants a blank check. He wants a $1.5 trillion blank check for a lot more war that Congress hasn't authorized and most of the country doesn't support. And what we're finding out is they've already overspent on what they were allocated last year. I mean, they didn't plan for an Iran war. They didn't plan for using the Army on the border. They didn't plan for $1 billion of National Guard expenses in the Capitol because none of that was approved. And now the Army's got to figure out how to make that balance sheet work, so they got to make cuts on training, and that's going to impact our troops, going to impact morale, and I think it just shows how they're getting way ahead of their skis. You can't commit our troops and then ask for support from the country afterward. When you do that, this is what happens.
So you look at Trump's polling, like right now I have the approval, the average, right? It's just under 40. So it's at, in the 30s barely. It's been in the high 30s, low 40s for some time. This is from DDHQ. But this poll, this is the Economist poll that looks at individual, at more demographics, Democrats, independents, non-MAGA, MAGA, and all of that. You're our, resident independent right here. So this column, all across the board, if you just look at where that is, strongly approve 8, somewhat approve 16. So you're like 24% on independents. So that's the backdrop for the president. So if you're reading that New York Times report to say we're going to be in Iran for a while, that doesn't get better, I don't think, politically, if that's the read on it.
Yeah, wars don't get more popular over time, and those numbers have continued to go downward. That is a massive disaster, not just for Trump, but especially for Republicans down ballot.
Right.
Because independents are 45% of the country. They're not a small minority. They're almost a majority. They're definitely a plurality. Only about 27% of the country is Republican. About 27% is Democrats. If you lose independents, you lose everything.
Who are the independents now? I know you are. You're going to tell me. But who's an independent now? Because some people convince, well, there's no real independence. They lean one way or the other. So in other words, are these disaffected or angry Republicans that say they're independents or Democrats, or are they truly independents? What's a true
More and more that they're truly independent. People who say none of the above.
Because
right?
they hate both parties.
Well, 60% of young people, for example, are independent, unaffiliated. They've never been a part of a party. They reject both parties. They think that both of them have sent us off a cliff, and they don't want any of it. I think that's where the future is. More than half of veterans are independents. They're people who I think are sick of the toxicity.
What issues do they, again, I'm going to you as our resident independent expert, care about the most? Like, what's the biggest
I think
issue?
they care about all the same issues that other Americans do.
Inflation.
They care about inflation. They care about prices. They care about national security. They care about education. They care about the border. And they also are looking for people who can get things done. And they're not loyal to a party, so they're agnostic. They're waiting to see which party can deliver to them, rather than just giving their name, blindly to a jersey like past generations.
Well, they don't like Democrats either. The Democrats in Congress don't poll well. But that's
less popular than Trump. I think that's really important to understand, that people are leaving both the Republican and Democratic Party, but they're not joining the other one. About 10,000 people leave the Republican and Democratic Party every week, but they're going independent. They're going in affiliate. They're not necessarily going over to the other side.
That was going to be my question. Do they go, just because Trump's in the 20s with independents, does that mean they're all voting Democrat at the midterms?
No, not at all. And I think that's why I and others are so excited about independent candidates who are offering an alternative. In the past, a lot of folks have said independents are the spoilers. If you look at red states like Nebraska or South Dakota or Idaho, the Democrats are actually the spoilers. They're much less popular than the independents are. And independents are becoming much more competitive in all those states. We saw last night there was a primary in Nebraska. The Democrat has agreed to drop out and support independent veteran Dan Osborn. A head-to-head between an independent and a Republican, especially when the independent is a veteran and a steam-fitter, very populist. This is going to be, I think, one of the most exciting matchups to watch this year, because the field is level.
Yeah,
we had a Democrat who can be a spoiler.
Here in the studio a couple of weeks ago. It was an interesting candidate and interesting times to be hosting the Independent Americans podcast, I guess, right? Thank you, Paul. We'll see you next week. Paul Rieckhoff.
Archipelago, he tells me the left and right are dreams for those without a clue. And when you wake, it's time to grow. And it's not cool to believe in school, but if I can say one thing, I've seen the children of the revolution and the good trouble they can bring. He says the red and blue are dead and independent is an attitude. An island in the sea of rhetoric and archipelago, he tells me the left and right are dreams for those without a clue. And when you wait, it's time to grow.
Powered by Righteous Media.